Hello, everyone, and say a big hello to our very special guest this week. We have Valentina on the podcast. Hi, Valentina. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
I'm very excited. I know you and I were just chatting. It's taken a little while to get this to happen. We are in two different time zones, basically halfway around the world. So
Yep.
we're both very busy individuals trying to make this work, and so it feels extra special for me that it has finally happened and it feels like everything's aligned. And I can't wait to just chat with you a little bit more, get to know you, your amazing work. First off, the work that you're doing through your company Daye is beyond what women need in this world. I think it's like long overdue. So why don't you, instead of me giving a very rough
Mhm.
idea of what Daye is, why don't you share with our listeners what Daye is all about?
Yeah. So Day is a gynecological health platform that centers around the idea that we can repurpose menstrual tampons, which so many of us already use, to do a lot more than just soaking up menstrual fluid. And we're building on top of the existing scientific knowledge, which has determined that the vagina is one of the safest and most effective ways to deliver medications in women. So we started in 2020, after 3 years of research and development, we introduced the world's first pain relieving tampon to market, which has now supported over 100,000 people in the UK. And then another 3 years of R&D later, in 2023, we introduced the world's first diagnostic tampon, which enables people to screen for STIs, vaginal infections, and soon human papillomavirus (HPV), which is the
Mm.
precursor to cervical cancer, all from the comfort of their home in a very accessible and affordable way. Beyond these two products, we've created a comprehensive telemedical layer, which you can use to connect with vetted empathetic physicians and OBGYNs, holistic healthcare specialists who focus on women's health conditions, obtain prescription treatments, or book a consultation in a clinic nearby to where you live. So we want to be the place where you go for all of your gynecological health needs from your first menstruation through to menopause and beyond. And we think that where we can really add value is in the design and manufacture of novel medical and diagnostic devices.
And you're definitely adding value. I can attest to that as someone who has endometriosis, has been through years of trying to talk with doctors about
Mm,
getting a diagnosis, understanding treatment, and not really feeling heard, especially when it comes to something that happens every month, which is our cycle. It's
yeah.
a big part of women's lives, and it's something that we as society has taught women is to kind of push to the side and ignore, just get through, move on, and let's not talk about it. But like you
Mm,
said, there's so much misinformation and not enough information around the women's body and what
mm,
we have access to within ourselves rather than going and
mm,
looking for it from someone else. And as someone again like has endometriosis, the tampons that you created that help with endometriosis pain or adenomyosis pain, that is just like out of this world believable. I just couldn't understand that this hasn't happened before 2020 and that this wasn't even a concept. So is that something that you've dealt with or you've seen women in your life navigate and it was something you felt called to do?
yeah, I think the society that we live in massively trivializes female pain. And it starts at a very young age when you have your first painful period and you're taught to just grit your teeth, get on with it. It's all part of being a woman. If you can't bear your menstrual cramps, how are you ever going to deliver a baby?
Mm-hmm.
It's all just prep for a lifetime of suffering. And I worry that this trivialization of female pain extends beyond the world of healthcare and into our economies and our relationships. Because when you teach a young girl that she should just accept her pain, she's then a lot more likely to accept an abusive relationship or an unfair working situation. Um, so, one of the things that I feel most passionately about is just debunking the myth that female pain is normal, the women have a higher threshold for pain, and therefore, we shouldn't be given pain relief or we shouldn't be the subject of medical innovation because we need to be protected as the vessels of life.
Mm.
I feel really strongly that we need to continuously invest in science and innovation so that we can overcome the historical biases that you touched upon when it comes to the availability of medical data and medical research for the way that existing medications affect the female physiology, because our physiology is different, and into female specific conditions like endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I'm very much inspired in starting Daye through my personal journey. I was 9 when I had my first painful period,
Mm-hmm.
and that at that time was considered young, but now is approximately the average age at which people start their menstrual cycle. And I just felt really unprepared. No one had any conversations with me about what to expect, the changes my body was going to go through. And then very quickly after starting my menstrual cycle, I was placed on oral hormonal contraception,
Mm-hmm.
even though, I wasn't sexually active, so that I could manage my period pain. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with oral hormonal contraception or hormonal contraception in general, and it can, for a lot of patients, bring a lot of relief, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
designed to be our first line of defense against period pain. And I think we do need to take side effects into account. Now, there are lots of side benefits to taking hormonal contraception, but the way in which we prescribe hormonal contraception today is incredibly ad hoc. It's like this Russian
Yeah.
roulette mechanism where you go into the OB's office and they give you some form of contraception, you go away, you try it for 6 months, you have side effects or you don't, and then you come back and you try again. And for most patients, the cycle of trying different forms of hormonal contraception, they may have to go through 6, 7, 8 different forms before they find
Mm-hmm.
one that works for them. So I feel really strongly that we should have a much more educated perspective on how to diagnose gynecological disease and how best to treat it. And what I hope that we'll be able to achieve with Daye is to not just bring innovative problem-solving products to market, but
Mm-hmm.
also through the revenues of these products, create an evergreen source of funding for continuous gynecological health innovation. Because we do have the big issue of there's a lack of innovation, but we have an even bigger issue, which is that there's a lack of funding in
Yeah.
gynecological health. There's a lack of private funding and public funding. So I really hope that we can create this mechanism that facilitates evergreen innovation and evergreen funding for gynecological health.
And I think that's such a huge aspect of Daye that a lot of other period product companies, they talk about how they're solving problems. They're, offering women more cleaner solutions, whether that's unbleached tampons, unbleached pads, things like that. But that cycle, that evergreen cycle of giving back and investing back into research has never really been discussed before, especially when it comes to women's health or gynecological health. That is something that I've never heard discussed. It's never even been a concept by some of these big players in the space that have owned the space for
Mm.
decades and decades and truly actually have the ability to do that. So when you started to set out with Daye and create this concept of not only the products, the tangible aspect, but then the research, creating the community and the sort of health cycle and healthcare cycle, how did you go about coming up with that? Because in my mind, even as an entrepreneur, my mind is like blown trying to figure out how I would even begin doing that. How did you address such a huge, not only concern, but advantage that Daye could actually take on and break it down into digestible pieces to start building out?
It was really bit by bit. And I love this Gloria Steinem quote of the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. So I just had these like moments of discovering information about gynecological health, being really frustrated, and then wanting to do something different in our space. And I really started in the world of tampons and the world of tampon manufacturing. And I understood that it's incredibly monopolized. So
Mm-hmm.
there's only one company in the world that manufactures all of the tampon manufacturing lines globally. And then there's another monopoly which buys these machines and places them in a room and manufactures for all of the brands, whether they be organic, non-organic, off the shelf, direct to consumer. That's why all tampons look the same, perform the same, they have the same absorbency profile, same sustainability profile, because we haven't had innovation from a grassroots perspective, from a first principles perspective. We've had changes to the branding of the wrapper. We've
Yeah.
had changes to the distribution model through the direct to consumer businesses. But as far as I'm aware, no one has actually, other than they, redesigned the manufacturing process so that we can create a product that works better, is
Mm-hmm.
safer, and it's more sustainable. Um, And the reason why other companies haven't been able to do so is the lack of funding. It's
Yeah.
incredibly challenging to fundraise in the space of femtech and gynecological health. And I see this with all of my female founder friends. The companies that they're creating are created in conditions of extreme scarcity, where you really have to pinch every penny and be extremely mindful of your entire spend as an organization. And, it's a huge shame that this is the
Mm-hmm.
reality of the space today. But we also need to think about the fact that us underfunding gynecological health right now is not going to have immediate repercussions for the populations that currently need innovative products and services. It's going to have repercussions for future generations as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not just limiting access to better quality products for the women that are alive today. We're robbing future generations of access to better gynecological health solutions by not investing in the space. And on the investment side of things, part of the issue is that there aren't enough female investors in
Mm-hmm.
venture capital, and there aren't enough female decision makers in the allocation of public capital, so
Mm-hmm.
grant funding. But I think it's also a visibility issue. So very few people actually know that less than 1% of the venture capital funding that goes to healthcare goes to the entirety of women's health.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 2.4% of public funding that goes to healthcare projects goes to gynecological health. So I feel really strongly about sharing this information so that more people are aware, and they can then push for small changes within their own immediate
Mm-hmm.
communities and bubbles.
Yeah, I think those stats are pretty outstanding when you hear them. I know in North America, not necessarily for femtech or technology, but it's less than 3% of investment goes to female owned companies in any category. And so hearing,
Yeah.
2.4% or less than 1%, when you think about it and you look at the population, women are more of the population in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and we are consistently receiving less and less year after year and decade after decade. And like you said, it's not something that we're going to see the negative impact right away, which maybe would help us if we were to see, within
Hmm.
6 months what happens if we don't get that investment. But even from you, when you were young, you started your period at 9. Now that is the average
Hmm.
age. We're seeing it happen
Hmm.
in front of us, just not impacting us in a day-to-day way. And I can only imagine how hard that must have been for you to enter those spaces, because Daye has raised investment. You have gone through
Mm-hmm.
that very wild experience of raising. How did you navigate
Yeah.
that as not only a woman, but a woman talking about gynecological health, which make men very uncomfortable, and actually getting to the place that you have found investors that believe in what you're doing and are on board with you? How did you find the confidence and the to feel empowered to go into those situations and have those conversations?
Can I say delusion? Is delusion an
It
acceptable answer?
is very
Um,
acceptable, yes.
um, Yeah, so most funders that I speak with, whether they be public or private funders, you can just tell from their body language, how they can't make eye contact. They look at the floor when I
Mm-hmm.
pitch, that they're really uncomfortable with the subject of gynecological health, because women's health is still largely over sexualized.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in a lot of different ways. You see that in research, interestingly, a lot. So one of the biggest studies in endometriosis was an Italian study in 2012, and it was a publicly funded study that got published in a peer-reviewed journal, and it was looking at the perceived attractiveness of people with endometriosis,
Oh.
and the characteristics that they chose to measure attractiveness were the size of your breasts, whether you had a thin waistline,
Mm.
and how soon you became sexually active. So, how young you were when you became sexually active. And again, this is a study from 2012, so this isn't, like decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's really important for us as consumers, for women as consumers, to realize how we're being massively shortchanged.
Mm-hmm.
And we also need to ourselves start backing the meaningful companies in our space, and the meaningful solutions in our space, and we need to ourselves confirm to ourselves and to the world that female pain is not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
What I see when we're advertising days, there are still a lot of women who are just so gaslit by society that, period pain is normal, vaginal infections are normal, like, yes, you've had a thrush infection for 10 years, so what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't sound like a significant enough problem. So then we ourselves as consumers don't allow ourselves to back the companies that are doing meaningful work, or to speak to, policymakers, and to make the demands that we need to make in order for change to happen. Another key example of the over sexualization of women's health is the fact that you're banned as a gynecological health company, whether you're advertising menopause products or breastfeeding products, you're banned from using Meta, Google, TikTok, all of the
Yeah.
large traditional channels that, for example, Viagra companies can
Yeah.
use.
Yes.
You can't advertise on, public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because ads about gynecological health, and this happens to my company all the time, get wrongfully classed as adult content, political
Mm-hmm.
content, sexual content. This happened to us today. Even we were advertising our tampon for detecting chlamydia,
Mm-hmm.
and we were told by Meta that our ads had to be removed because they were adult content. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we really two things. We need to stop sexualizing women's health.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't,
It's not a sexual
when female
experience.
founders,
Health, yeah, they're two different things.
yeah, it's just our physiological reality. And when female founders walk into rooms with male investors talking about gynecological health, we're not flirting. Just
No.
because we're talking about vaginas, we're not flirting. Just a quick PSA. And then every one of us votes with our dollars and our spend every single
Mm-hmm.
day. Like, we have the power to back solutions that are meaningful, and to donate to charities that are doing important work in
Mm-hmm.
gynecological health innovation. And it is a fight that we're going to fight for ourselves, while also
Yeah.
bringing allies on board. But we do need to fight it for ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really big point you made is our dollars can make a huge difference. I think in today's world, we as consumers, male or female, feel overwhelmed in so many ways with where we should be shopping, how we should be shopping, and a lot of times that overwhelm response is just whatever is the most convenient. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to think about it. I'll just get what I need and move on to the next thing. And I understand that. We are inundated with advertisements, obviously not for anything that is related to women's health, but we are inundated with advertisements for everything in every direction that it just feels like making a decision can be so difficult. But one thing that I've really had to learn as I've navigated my endometriosis journey is to slow down and really take account for what I'm doing for myself, what actions are actually benefiting my physical body, my physical and mental health, and what I can be doing to, whether it's one day at a time, one year at a time, better my experience and also have those conversations with other people. And I think that's a big part of it too is if we see that, okay, when I'm buying a product, something like Daye, and I'm experiencing a better period or I'm having more understanding of my own vaginal health, I need to talk to people about that. I shouldn't be uncomfortable to share that with my close group of friends, my sister, my mother, whomever it may be. And it can start small in that way where it does feel overwhelming. How do we make these changes? How do we get more femtech companies more than 2% of, investment? How do we do that? And then a lot of times we get paralyzed in fear. And it is those small steps of seeing where our dollars go, redirecting our dollars to companies that are doing more, that are advocating for more like Daye. And also, your products are amazing. I've been using your products for the past couple of months, and
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
yeah, it really is night and day in comparison to what you get at the drugstore on the shelf. Because, like you said, everything else actually is the same thing. It's just a different color wrapper that's on it. It's a different color for super, a different color for regular. It's all the exact same product. And I don't know if this is true. I did hear this on TikTok, so you could probably correct me if I'm wrong. But I did hear that in 2023, it was the first year that they
Yeah.
started using, what was it, menstrual blood
Yeah.
for
So,
testing on tampons and pads. I'm like,
yeah.
what?
Well, you see that in advertising as well, right? Like we only show this sanitized blue fluid in
Mm-hmm.
ads. You can't ever show red fluid, even though in our mass media we do see scenes of violence, whether
Mm-hmm.
it be in online gaming or horror films. Like the modern consumer of media has seen blood before. For some reason, we are censoring menstrual blood
Mm-hmm.
quite significantly. Just back to the point about people voting with their daughters. Like, I'm completely aware of the economic situation that we live in. Obviously, I'm a founder. We're not the
Yeah.
best paid people in the country, but I hear this all the time from people in our community saying, "Oh, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one that had such severe period pain. I thought I was the only one who struggled with these recurrent vaginal infections." And there is no bigger relief than the relief of realizing, no, you're actually not at all alone. There's hundreds and thousands of people who are going through the exact same experience as you. And I think there's so much power in us sharing our experiences with others and opening up so that we can
Mm-hmm.
destigmatize and desexualize women's health.
Yeah. And especially starting at a young age, too. I think if we, at age 10, 13, whatever age we enter these conversations in these spaces, if that stigma is removed at that age, think of how empowered that generation is going to be. Think
Mm.
of how empowered they're going to be to listen to their body, to speak up for their body. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, that carries into other aspects of your life. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just your physical or gynecological health, it is women in bad relationships and abusive
Mm-hmm.
relationships finally realizing that they need to speak up for themselves and that they can't minimize their pain or minimize what they're going through. And that's something that I've really become passionate about as I've shared my journey with endometriosis, because when I was diagnosed at age 20, I didn't know anyone that had endometriosis. It
Mm.
was something that I felt ashamed of because it felt like, well, there's something wrong with me.
Mm.
My body isn't performing the way it's supposed to. It can affect my fertility, all these different things. And once I finally started to talk about it in my mid 20s, I realized, oh, wow, there's so many people I know in my immediate life that are navigating getting diagnosed for the same thing and
Mm.
struggling with that diagnosis. And just having these conversations can not only empower our individual selves, but then empower our community. And when we have community that's aligned and committed to the same cause, we can really start making a difference. And that's what I really
Mm.
see with what Daye's doing with the products, the conversations, everything that you're doing is just moving that needle not only a little bit forward, but miles
Mm.
forward. And it's just really inspiring to see.
I'm really glad that our mission has resonated with you, and I'm also really happy for you that you got an endometriosis diagnosis, because so many people struggle for 8, 10, 12 years to
Mm-hmm.
get any answers. 20 is actually a really young age
Really young.
to have received answers. So well done to you for advocating for yourself and lobbying for your needs successfully.
Yeah, it's definitely something that when I look back, I feel very privileged to have had that diagnosis and understanding it
Mm.
at such a young age. And it's something that I now really want to encourage other people to be asking more questions, asking friends. And it did take a lot for me, multiple different hospitals and specialists to get the diagnosis.
Mm.
And when you're dealing with pain, this is one thing that I will
Mm.
always talk about is chronic pain removes your ability to do a lot of things, whether
Mm.
you realize it or not. And one of the biggest things it removes your ability to do is advocate for yourself, because that takes energy. And when you're dealing
Mm.
with pain, your energy is usually
Mm.
going to dealing with the pain and navigating the
Mm.
pain. And so being able to remind yourself that even if it is a small step forward, it's one phone call, it's one more appointment, it is always moving forward and getting that diagnosis and being seen and being respected in your body and your lived experience.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and studies from the UK show that women with endometriosis can forego as much as £40,000 in earned income in the time that it
Wow.
takes them to get a diagnosis so they can start managing their symptoms. So that's about $65,000. Um, and again, to the point that I made earlier, there is a huge economic cost that we don't account for, if we envision the Maslow hierarchy of needs, a
Hmm.
lot of women are still stuck in layer one because we can't look after our physical needs because of the huge gender gap in research and innovation.
Yeah. And just how the world is designed. The, workplace is designed for men on a 24-hour cycle. Women are operating at a 28-day cycle. There's so much conversation happening around that, just understanding the phases of your cycle. I think
Mm,
that's a great beginning place for people who feel uncomfortable with understanding
mm,
their gynecological health is just understand the four phases of your cycle. I didn't even know there was four phases until I think like 4 years ago. I think
yeah,
when I was in high school I thought there was just two phases, your ovulation and your menstruation. And that
yeah,
was basically it.
yeah,
So there is more information and it's starting somewhere small that maybe doesn't feel overwhelming or uncomfortable, and then getting to
mm,
a point where you're starting to have these conversations. And I think the best thing to do is have them with your friends, have them with your partner, make sure that your partner is aware of your physical needs in not only your romantic relationship, but in your physical health and what is
mm,
healthy for you and empowering for you. And that's when you start to show up better for yourself. And it is that domino effect of
yeah,
once one person's feeling better and learning more, they're going to spread that and share that. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I know it takes a lot of
mm,
energy to not only run a business, to raise investment, and to make such a huge change. So I think what you're doing is very remarkable. And I'm very inspired by seeing your
mm.
journey and seeing what Daye has been able to accomplish in just over 3 years, almost 4 years now. And I think this is just the beginning. So I want our entire audience to know, where can they find you? Where can they shop Daye? Where can they get all of this information about what you're doing?
Yeah, so we're on yourday.com. That's yourdaye.com. And on our website, we also have one of the richest libraries of gynecological health content, which everyone can access for free. We started our blog Vitals in 2018. And it's called Vitals because we think that your menstrual cycle is one of your vital signs. And, just as you check in on your oxygen levels and you're checking on your temperature, your menstrual cycle can tell you so much about your current state of well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So on yourday.com, you'll find our blog, you'll find our products. And in the blog, we've covered everything from adenomyosis, fibroids, chronic vaginal infections, UTIs, miscarriage, preterm labor, menopause, perimenopause in a very digestible and informative way. One of the key values that we have is to spread gynecological health information. So I think so frequently information about our bodies is limited to research journals and medical articles, and it can often feel like, oh, I need a medical degree in order to understand the workings of my body. And it really doesn't need to be this way. Like, there's so many different complicated aspects of the world that we've managed to simplify and present in a digestible way. I feel really strongly that we should be doing the same for women's health, because at the end of the day, you are your biggest health advocate. You're your biggest health hero. You live in your body every single day. You can track your symptoms better than anyone else. And, you should always look for help where it's available and where possible. But there is something really empowering about finally understanding how your body works, finally understanding, that there's four phases of the menstrual cycle, that
Mm-hmm.
period pain isn't normal, that persistent vaginal infections may be caused by a disruption to the vaginal microbiome, not by thrush or bacterial vaginosis or a yeast infection. Yeah, I think we all need a much better standard of education on
Mm-hmm.
our bodies.
Yeah, and you're making it accessible, which I think is remarkable because, I think we all know that need is there, but not a lot of people are willing to take the time to make it accessible, digestible, and it will feel less intimidating when we can learn about ourselves, like you said, without feeling like you need a medical degree.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. It's a step forward. Like I said, you and Day have only been around just shy of 4 years, going into your fourth year now, and I can only imagine what 10 years will look like for you. And I am so thrilled to be able to join this journey and be a part of what Daye is doing and advocate for just more information, more access, more money for women's health,
Mm.
and empowering not only our generation but future generations. So thank you so much, Valentina. We really appreciate your time, and I know our community, I'm guarantee you, is going to be following along and supporting you every step of the way.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving gynecological health a platform. We don't get many platforms, so I'm always really grateful to the people that take the time to talk about women's health in detail.
Well, we'll always be here advocating and wishing you the very best. So thank you.
Thank you.